For years, Rick Calloway ruled his restaurant with silent threats and private punishments. He watched over Hearth and Ember not as a leader but as a predator, targeting the vulnerable, especially one server named Emily, who bore the weight of fear with every shift. She stayed late when no one else had to, flinched at his voice, and felt trapped in a job she couldn't afford to leave. No one questioned him. Until that night. But when they picked Emily, they didn't know who they were messing with. They did know she had the quiet backing of Marcus Ray, Hollywood star, but more importantly, the owner of the restaurant. What followed wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. A reversal of power, accountability served cold, in the very office where fear once lived. What came next wasn't just justice, it was exposure. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one man, it's about all of us. Golden light glowed inside the restaurant, but something colder stirred beneath it. A Friday night rush hummed with laughter and clinking glasses. Yet just beyond the kitchen, a young woman wept silently. And the man who built this house was about to walk straight into its darkest room. They called him Marcus Ray, the kind of man whose fame echoed louder than his footsteps. But that night, under the dim glow of Los Angeles streetlights, he wasn't Marcus the actor or Marcus the mogul. He was just a man in a hoodie and worn jeans, shoulders slightly hunched, walking alone through the back entrance of his own restaurant. The place was called Hearth Ember, and it wasn't born out of ego or indulgence. Marcus had spent years building it from the ground up, not just investing money, but heart. Every spice on the menu, every person on the payroll, every tile behind the bar had passed through his hands or approval. Hearth Ember wasn't just a business. It was supposed to be a place of warmth, of dignity, of second chances. That's why, every few months, Marcus would slip in quietly without warning. No entourage, no cameras, just a regular customer blending into the crowd. Because numbers and spreadsheets tell you what's working, but silence tells you what's broken. Inside, the restaurant pulsed with life. The Friday dinner rush had crescendoed into a symphony of sizzling dishes and clinking glasses. Conversations danced over the tables like flames over a hearth. If you glanced around, you'd say everything was perfect. But Marcus knew better. Have you ever walked into a room that was full of laughter, but something deep inside you whispered that something was wrong? He scanned the room with trained eyes. It wasn't the food, which looked impeccable. Not the guests, who smiled easily. It was the presence, subtle but heavy, like smoke behind wallpaper. The kind you only noticed if you knew where to look. He caught sight of a tall man by the host stand, posture rigid, eyes scanning the floor like a warden more than a manager. Something about him felt tight, contained, too watchful. Marcus filed it away. He stepped toward the bar, heart steady. He wasn't sure what he'd find tonight, but he had learned one hard truth in his years at the top. What people hide in plain sight is often the most dangerous thing of all. And this time, he wasn't going to miss it. Marcus had just settled onto a stool at the far end of the bar when he heard it. Faint, barely there, a muffled, rhythmic sound, almost drowned out by the hum of voices and the clatter of plates. But it tugged at him, a sound you don't hear with your ears, but with something deeper. He turned his head slightly, pretending to adjust his seat. There it was again, coming from the narrow hallway near the kitchen. Someone was crying. Not the loud, dramatic sob of someone seeking attention. No, this was the quiet kind. The kind you try to strangle in your throat. The kind born from a place so tired, so cornered, it forgets how to scream. Marcus stood slowly, careful not to draw attention, and moved toward the hallway, the sounds growing clearer with each step. As he passed the break room door, ajar by only a few inches, he caught a glimpse. A young woman bent over a steel counter, fingers gripping its edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her shoulders shook. A young man in a Hearth Ember uniform stood beside her, whispering, frantic. His hand hovered near her back, but didn't touch, like he wanted to comfort her, but didn't. "I can't," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He said, if I don't do what he wants, I'm out." The words hit Marcus like a gut punch. He stopped in place, back pressed to the wall, breath caught in his chest. This wasn't burnout. This wasn't just a bad night. This was fear. Real, crawling, soul-thinning fear. For a moment the noise of the restaurant seemed miles away. All that remained was her voice and the weight of what it meant. He wanted to burst in, to say something, anything. But right now he wasn't Marcus Ray, the owner. He was a stranger, and strangers don't get listened to in moments like this. So he waited and he listened. Have you ever heard someone breaking, but knew they were trying to hold themselves together just long enough to survive the shift? Marcus did, and he knew then something inside his house was rotting, and it was time to find out just how deep the rot went. Marcus returned to his seat at the bar, but his thoughts stayed in that hallway. He kept his body relaxed, casual even, but his eyes never stopped moving. He scanned the restaurant floor again, not the food, not the service, but the eyes, the posture, the tension, and there he was, right where Marcus had first seen him. The tall man in the navy shirt, standing stiff by the host's stand, arms crossed over his chest like a wall. His name tag read Calloway. Marcus watched him closely. Calloway's gaze moved like a searchlight, not observing but interrogating. Servers passing by seemed to tilt slightly under the weight of his stare, as if their backs bowed without them noticing. His face never broke, his eyes never softened, and every few minutes his jaw clenched, like he was chewing glass behind that polite mask. It wasn't hard to guess. Marcus had seen this before, years ago, before the fame, before the movies. He'd worked in kitchens, scraped dishes for men like Calloway, men who knew the rules only so they could bend them around those who had no choice. But how do you challenge power when it wears a name tag and smiles for customers? Calloway didn't just run the room, he owned the fear inside it. As Marcus watched, a young server, maybe 19, maybe 20, dropped a spoon as he passed by. It clattered loudly against the floor. Calloway didn't yell, he didn't move, but he turned, and with just a look, froze the kid where he stood. The boy mumbled an apology, bent to pick it up, and all the light drained from his face. It wasn't the look of someone afraid of being reprimanded. It was the look of someone afraid of what came next. Marcus exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the bar. That cold, familiar anger stirred in his chest, not the reckless kind, but the focused kind. The kind that knows when to move and when to wait. Have you ever looked at someone and known, without a single word, that they held a kind of power no one ever gave them, but everyone feared? Marcus had, and he was about to take it back. The bartender brought over a glass of water, but Marcus barely touched it. His focus was locked on the hallway. The sobs had quieted, but they hadn't stopped. Moments later, the young man who had been in the break room, tall, wiry, eyes shadowed by something heavier than fatigue, stepped out and headed back onto the floor. He moved like someone trying to appear normal, but everything about him betrayed the truth. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the notepad in his apron. His jaw was clenched too tight. His gaze avoided the manager. Marcus stood and drifted toward the server station near the back, catching the young man just as he was organizing a stack of plates. "Hey," Marcus said, low and easy. "Got a pen?" The kid blinked, startled, but nodded. "Yeah, sure." He handed one over. Marcus didn't walk away. He glanced down at the name tag, Tyler. "I couldn't help but notice your friend's upset," Marcus said, voice still calm. Tyler stiffened immediately, gripping the plates like they might break. "She's fine," he replied, too fast. Marcus tilted his head, just enough to let the silence stretch. "She doesn't look fine." There was a long pause. Too long. Tyler's eyes flicked across the room to where Calloway still stood, then dropped to the floor. Marcus waited. The truth often sat just under a person's skin, waiting for permission to speak. Finally, Tyler exhaled, a breath like surrender. "She's not," he murmured. "She's scared." Marcus leaned in a little, just enough. "Is it a customer issue?" Tyler hesitated. That moment told Marcus everything. "No," he said at last. "It's not." His eyes flicked again toward Calloway. And there it was, a thread of something ugly, tense, abusive, familiar. What does it feel like to work under someone who makes every shift feel like survival? Marcus knew. And now he knew Emily was working through something deeper than stress. She was trapped. And Marcus wasn't walking away. The air shifted. Marcus felt it before he saw him. Footsteps, measured, heavy, deliberate, moved across the floor like a drumbeat of control. Calloway was approaching. Tyler went rigid. His fingers, still curled around the plates, began to tremble. "Everything okay over here?" Calloway's voice was smooth, too smooth, like ice across broken glass. Marcus turned slowly, meeting him face to face for the first time. Calloway was in his mid-40s. Crisp shirt, pressed within an inch of perfection, salt and pepper hair combed back with military precision. His face had the sharpness of a man who had spent years perfecting his smile for guests, and his glare for staff. "Just getting a pen," Marcus said calmly, nodding toward Tyler. He was kind enough to help. Calloway's eyes didn't leave Marcus. Then, with a hand that landed too firmly, he clapped Tyler on the shoulder. "Let's stay focused on work." Tyler nodded quickly, eyes fixed on the plates in front of him. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he didn't react. Not yet. He watched Calloway's retreating figure, felt the weight of the silent fear that followed in his wake. This wasn't just a tough manager. This was someone who knew how to break people quietly, not with yelling, but with implication, with the kind of control that lived in a raised eyebrow, a suggestion said in private, a schedule changed at the last minute to corner someone alone. And Emily? She was at the center of it. How many people do you think are hiding their pain behind professionalism, just trying to survive the shift without being noticed? Marcus stepped outside for a breath, letting the cold air hit his face. From the outside, the restaurant looked like success. Buzzing, golden lit, alive. But inside, a predator wore a name tag. And Marcus Ray had just declared war, quietly, carefully. But, absolutely, Marcus didn't linger outside for long. Just enough time to let the rage cool into clarity, just enough time to remind himself this wasn't about vengeance, it was about responsibility. When he stepped back into Hearth and Ember, the rush had begun to die down. Fewer customers, quieter chatter, the kind of calm that reveals more than it hides. He spotted Emily near the counter, taking an order with mechanical precision. Her voice was polite but hollow, like someone going through rehearsed lines in a play they couldn't leave. Marcus approached, slow and measured. "Excuse me," he said gently, loud enough for the guest to hear. "I need a word with you." Emily froze. "I'm helping someone right now," she said, eyes not quite meeting his. The woman at the counter frowned. "She's helping me." But Marcus didn't back off. His voice lowered, steady but urgent. "It's important." Emily glanced up, and in that moment something flickered. Recognition? Desperation? Hope? She nodded, murmured an apology to the customer, and stepped away. "What is this about?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned in, just enough. "I know what's happening." Her breath caught. For a moment, she looked like a child who had been found in the dark. "You're not alone," he added, soft but sure. "But I can't," she whispered. "You don't understand." He made it clear. "If I don't do what he says, I'm gone." Marcus didn't flinch. "You can, and you will, because he's not untouchable, not anymore." Then the shadow returned. Calloway stepped beside them, voice like silk laced with steel. Is there a problem? Emily shrank, just slightly, but Marcus saw it. Saw how the sound of that voice made her flinch like it had struck her skin. He turned to face the man, calm as ever. We're just having a conversation, he said smoothly. Calloway smiled, cold and practiced. Emily has a job to do, no time for private talks. Marcus caught it. The word private. The way Emily reacted to it. Her fingers clenched the hem of her apron. Her breathing quickened. That was the moment. Have you ever seen someone react to a single word like it carried a history no one else could see? Marcus had, and it told him everything. Marcus didn't answer Calloway. Not right away. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thin, worn leather wallet. Flipping it open, he revealed a sleek card, embossed, official, unmistakable. Executive owner, Hearth Ember Group, Marcus Ray. Emily's breath caught. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The servers nearby froze, as if the room itself had forgotten how to move. Plates hovered. Conversations faded. Calloway blinked. His confident posture faltered. My name is Marcus Ray, he said, voice calm but cutting, and you and I need to talk. The silence that followed felt sacred, a breaking of spell and silence. Calloway opened his mouth, but Marcus cut him off with a glance. It was the kind of look that doesn't ask for permission, it removes it. He turned to Emily. You're safe now. She stood there, unmoving for a heartbeat, then let out the kind of exhale that had been stuck in her chest for months. Years, maybe. Her fingers loosened from her apron. Her spine, just slightly, straightened. Calloway stammered, Sir, this must be a misunderstanding. Marcus's expression didn't change. Your office, he said, now. There was no room for discussion, no back door to slip through. Calloway swallowed, his throat tight with the realization that the power he'd wrapped himself in had just been stripped away. He turned stiffly and walked toward the back. Marcus looked at Emily one last time before following. Stay here, he said softly. This won't take long. Have you ever witnessed the exact second a man realizes he's no longer in control? Marcus had, and this was it. As the door closed behind them, the weight of what was left outside, it shifted. And the first tremor of change had begun. The office door closed with a finality that left no doubt. The reckoning had begun. Calloway paced behind his desk, the illusion of authority peeling away with every step. He tried to recover, to summon the smirk that had intimidated so many, but it landed crooked, unconvincing. I didn't expect to see you tonight, sir, he said with a forced chuckle. A surprise, I suppose. Marcus didn't smile. He placed both hands on the desk and leaned in, steady as stone. You know what else is a surprise, Rick? He said, voice low. Finding out that one of my managers uses his position to trap and manipulate employees? Calloway flinched, but still tried. With all due respect, sir, there must be a misunderstanding. Marcus pulled out his phone. He hit play. Emily's voice poured into the room, fragile, defeated. If I don't do what he says, I'm gone. Then Tyler's whisper. You can't let him. He doesn't own you. Color drained from Calloway's face. There were no more words, no room for escape. I know what you've been doing, Marcus said coldly. The late shifts, the isolation. The games you play with people who can't afford to lose their jobs. Calloway's hands trembled. Please, I can explain. No, Rick, you can't. Not to me, and not to corporate HR. Marcus lifted his phone again, this time to dial. You're done. Calloway collapsed into his chair, smaller now, powerless. Marcus turned and walked to the door. Outside, the staff had gathered, Emily, Tyler, Nate, all waiting, watching. He opened the door, looked directly at Emily, and said only 2 words. He's gone. Her reaction wasn't loud. No sobs, no cheers, just a long, shaking breath, as if her body had finally been granted permission to exhale after holding it in far too long. Have you ever seen someone begin to reclaim the space their fear once stole? Because Marcus had. Right then, in her eyes, the restaurant had changed. Not in appearance, nothing about the lighting or the tables or the warm amber glow had shifted, but the energy, that was different, tangibly different. It was as if the very walls had exhaled alongside Emily. Marcus stood before the staff, surrounded not by noise but by silence, the kind that listens. "You've all been working under someone who didn't deserve the position he held," he began. "That ends tonight." No one interrupted. He looked around the room, at the faces that had once smiled for guests but suffered in the shadows. Nate stood at the edge of the group, his hands tucked into his apron, gaze wary but steady. Tyler hovered beside Emily, not as a shield but a quiet source of strength. And Emily? She was standing taller now. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had retreated, just far enough to let something else in. Agency. "What happens now?" she asked, voice still uncertain. Marcus gave her a small, reassuring nod. "You tell me." For a moment, she didn't speak. You could almost hear her thinking, unpacking months of silence, folding away shame, piecing together words that had never been allowed to form. Then, softly, I don't want anyone else to go through this. Not here, not anywhere." Marcus nodded. "And they won't." The room remained still. Then Tyler stepped forward. "Sir," he said cautiously, "this isn't just about Calloway." Marcus's expression sharpened. "Go on." Tyler swallowed but didn't retreat. "The pressure, the way we're treated, the fear of speaking up. It's not just him. It's the system. It's how things have been." Nate added quietly, "Most of us feel like we can't afford to lose our jobs, so we say nothing." Emily looked down, guilt flickering in her eyes. "I wanted to speak up so many times," she murmured, "but I thought maybe it was normal." "Have you ever questioned your own pain, wondering if what hurt you was just how the world was meant to be?" Marcus took a breath. That was exactly why he'd come. Marcus looked at them, Emily, Tyler, Nate, and then beyond them, to the others now slowly stepping closer. No longer just employees. No longer just faces on a schedule. They were people, wounded, wary. "Oh, this stops today," Marcus said, his voice low but unwavering. "Not just Calloway. The culture that allowed him to thrive ends here." They listened, still unsure how far to trust, still learning the shape of safety. "I'm not interested in patching holes," he continued. "I want to rebuild. We're putting the restaurant under direct review, not just for compliance, but for humanity." The room fell even quieter. Then Emily, still gripping the edge of her apron, asked the question that hung heavy in every heart. "And if we speak up, will anyone actually listen?" Marcus turned to her fully. "I will." He let the words settle. No grand gestures, just that promise. Heavy enough to carry. Emily held his gaze, then, finally, slowly, she nodded. Across the room, Tyler's posture eased. Nate crossed his arms. Not in defiance now, but in calm. The beginning of belief. But Marcus wasn't done. "This won't be easy," he said. "Real change never is. But this team, you deserve better. And if any of you want to help shape what comes next, I'll be right here, listening, acting, standing with you." A hush of disbelief lingered. Could it really shift like this? How many people go through life never imagine they have the power to change the system, because no one ever told them they could? One by one, heads nodded. That night, as the staff closed up, Marcus stood outside in his car, watching. Emily left with Tyler and Nate, the three of them speaking quietly under the soft streetlights. No loud laughter, no tears, but something had lifted. A weight, centuries old, had shifted just a little. And for the first time in a long time, they didn't just survive the shift. They walked into something new. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. A look avoided, a voice lowered, a presence that makes others shrink. Sometimes, the greatest harm doesn't come from what is said, but from what people feel they cannot say. This story reminds us that dignity can quietly erode in the places we trust most, our workplaces, our communities. And yet, healing can begin with one person who chooses to see, to listen, and to act. You don't need a title to stand for what's right. Sometimes, it just takes a steady heart and a willingness to say, "This isn't okay." Whether we are in a position of power or simply someone who notices when others are hurting, we all carry the ability to shift the atmosphere around us. Perhaps the lesson here is simple but not small. Watch closely, speak gently, and never underestimate the impact of your presence. Because at any age, in any season of life, we still have the power to protect, to uplift, and to remind others, and ourselves, that silence never has to mean surrender. Emily didn't celebrate. She didn't raise her voice or fall into anyone's arms. Instead, she stepped outside into the night air, took a slow breath, and stood still, no longer shrinking. Sometimes, quiet is its own kind of power. Survival without bitterness, healing without spectacle, and strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Inside, the restaurant would begin again, but not as it was, with new policies, new eyes on leadership, and a promise, this time spoken out loud, that no one would be left to suffer in silence. The echoes of what happened wouldn't disappear. They would become the foundation for something better. Because injustice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers behind closed doors, and justice, it answers back with calm, steady resolve. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.